One of the things that we find in the readings many weeks is that a symbol becomes kind of predominant or preeminent, and that symbol draws our attention, causes us to reflect. This past week, for example, we had the symbol of the vineyard, and this week we hear the symbol of a banquet. Isaiah is proclaiming to his people that on this mountain, the Lord will remove all of the things that burden them, and they will be part of a banquet where there's juicy foods, choice wines, everything you would want. Now, as we listen to that, we're probably more immediately reflective upon the fact that since COVID began, many banquets, dinners, and events have been canceled. Maybe for some of you, you might say, I haven't been to a nice dinner or a banquet in many months. And so somehow the reading seems to be a bit of a disconnect. It doesn't relate. In fact, it seems so flowery and joyful, we might wonder almost if Isaiah was on something, telling these people about all of this wonderment of a banquet. But if we think about the context, Isaiah is talking to a people who are in exile. They're longing to be free, longing to be home. So the reading was probably equally as challenging for them. All of these niceties, and yet as they look around, it seems like there's not much to be joyful about. And yet Isaiah was the one who said to them, God will provide. There is joy in knowing that God is with us. So then we move to the gospel story, again, a banquet setting. The king really wanted to have a banquet for the people. He had no stops in what they were going to do. They killed the fatted calf. They prepared this great feast. But even though the king was generous in extending an invitation, all of the people seemed to have an excuse why they couldn't come, why they couldn't share in the banquet. After the second invitation, the people were even nasty. They hurt and killed the servants the king had sent. But that did not stop the king from having the banquet. Even though they were less than respectful, less than grateful for all that the king had done, the banquet went on. In fact, he went out and he said to them, don't go to those that got on the invitation list. Go to everybody, out on the streets, the bad alike. Tell them to come in. And no matter how they're dressed or what they look like, invite them. And provide for them even the wedding garment, so that everyone can appear to fit in, enjoy, and be part of the party. All but one. There was the one person who maybe you would call the spoiler. He came, but he didn't even want to follow some of the basic protocols of kindness and gratitude. Didn't want to put on the wedding garment. And so he was put out. He was unwilling to even move a little bit to show any response to the king's gratitude. I think as we look at these readings today, we are reminded that we are invited to God's banquet, albeit a bit more challenging in these COVID times because of concerns for health. But nonetheless, we're invited to come to the banquet here on earth and eventually to share in the banquet in heaven. And what does God ask of us? A little bit of movement, some gratitude, an awareness of God's love and presence in our world. But the one catch to it all is God can invite us, but we do have to make the first step. Something to show our openness, something to show our gratitude, our willingness to respond. In many ways, I think of the phrase, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And that is so true of our own faith lives as well. God continually invites us. Mercy is ever present. Forgiveness is right there at our door. But we have to move. We have to take a step. We have to say, I love you. I want to be with you. I want to give my life to you. And so as we continue our liturgy this morning, and as we continue to go about our week, let us keep before us the image of a lush banquet table, reflective of the eternal heavenly banquet. Let us ask God's grace to take a look into our hearts and lives and to say, what's preventing me from making that first move, from taking that first step, to entering the door, receiving a wedding garment, similar to the garment we received at baptism, and that upon receiving that garment, that we enjoy the fullness of God's love, joy, mercy, and forgiveness.